and in Pompano Beach. And 95.3 FM, W237BD Boca Raton, the Health and Wealth Radio Network.
The opinions expressed on the following sponsored program are strictly those of the host, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors. It's Monday night at 9 p.m. and time for Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. Dr. Ricky Siegel is a certified sex therapist, educator, and supervisor, and his brother Larry Siegel is a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator. The Siegel brothers are here to answer all your questions about sex and sexuality, but we're unsure who to ask, including questions you didn't even know you had. They will also welcome guests from around the globe to talk about a wide variety of topics and issues within the fascinating world of sexuality. Thank you for joining us, and welcome to Sex Talk.
Good evening, and welcome to Sex Talk with the Siegel brothers. My name is Ricky Siegel. I'm a certified sex therapist.
And I'm Larry Siegel, a clinical sexologist and certified sexuality educator.
And my big brother.
Proud to be.
Always a pleasure to be here with you every week.
Yes, indeed. I always look forward to this time we could spend together.
Indeed. We are here in South Florida on the radio on WNN, 95.3 FM and 1470 AM. Here's the call-in line. If you're so inclined, jot down this number, 888-565-1470. We'd love to have you join the conversation, ask us questions. As the intro said, questions you didn't even know you had. And by all means, we'd love your comments on what we're yammering about.
Absolutely. And especially if you're parents and are raising children or have raised children, definitely call in. Let's talk about what we can do to raise sexually healthy, non-toxic men and women.
We were talking last week about these sexual scripts, these gender scripts that just don't seem to go away, even with what everybody hopes are going to be these glacially moving changes like Me Too, only to just shrug and go, yeah, well, and say nominate Kavanaugh and completely dismiss the claims of victims of sexual assault.
And, that's the thing that really sort of concerns me the most. Right? And, what we're seeing out of a lot of this stuff is not the dialogue, coming to the surface that we need to have, that, we are hoping it would be. It's, this is shades of the OJ trial. If you remember going back there, during the trial, while people were talking about domestic violence, and it did look like, women will be heard. And women were coming forward, and calls to domestic violence shelters across the country that were ringing off the hook.
Right.
But the moment that verdict came in, it went dark. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we've seen. But now, more than what we saw before, not only are women continuing to get that message that they don't matter, that they don't count, we're not going to believe them, but my big concern is that the guys are going to double down on their guy stuff, and a lot of these things that we've been, talking about and continue to talk about. That again, it's becoming an overused phrase, but it's now really part of the jargon, and it is sort of a buzzword. But this toxic masculinity, that I think is they're doubling down.
Yeah.
Right? Especially when now they're considering themselves the victims.
Oh, of course.
And you know what? It just comes down to, ladies, you just can't take a joke. Right? This is my biggest concern.
But what is funny is the worst of these kind of toxic masculine cliches and propagated stereotypes come from these old weenies. None of these guys are anything but macho. These old guys in Congress.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, they're just a bunch of wimps and weenies.
Well, sure.
And they're the worst offenders for perpetuating these myths.
Because they're insulated in a lot of ways. They really are, they keep themselves sort of above the fray. They're not really invested in any of this stuff. So they can afford to sort of go in their, I don't know what color that tower is, compared to the ivory tower. But no, they're sort of in their own little world, and that's why they can think the way that they think. Because they don't have to be
right.
bothered with, little pesky things like, reality and people.
And sex ed.
Well, that's part of reality and people.
Yeah.
How is it that they can be so completely separate from real world facts and issues and continue to perpetuate the ridiculous rhetoric that they do, especially around abstinence being the only way
That's right.
to make sure
Yes.
nothing happens.
The expected standard
Right.
for human sexual behavior.
Right. So it's not even that these people are sort of rhetorical versus realistic. Their rhetoric is whack. Completely. Right? And you know what? It didn't even really work in the 1500s.
And it didn't work in the 50s, no matter how hard people tried to pretend that there weren't problems then.
Right.
That, girls were prim and proper and boys were, rascally, but easily,
But still gentlemen.
well.
No, but see now,
that's
where's
the
these
script
good old
part.
days?
The predator thing has always been part of the script.
Well,
I
sure.
don't care what era it was. I don't know
Absolutely.
when men were considered gentlemen.
No,
In fact,
I'm
the
just-
more gentlemanly were probably the most lecherous.
Well, they had the
right?
darkest secrets, sure.
Well, like we're seeing still now.
Yeah.
History, nothing, everything old is new. Nothing new is new.
Or nothing's really changed. Is really, I think, what
sadly.
it kind of comes down to. Nothing has really
Yeah.
changed.
It gets a lot of lip service. It
Yeah.
gets a lot of the attention of the 60-second attention span, 24-hour news cycle until.
Well, there's reaction. Right?
Yeah.
There's reaction. There is anger. There is the sort of emotion that wells up, but then it dies down, and people have just moved on. And unfortunately, it's even tougher now. And we've had this conversation before that it seems, especially with this administration, every day is a new outrage that makes yesterday's outrage seem not so bad. Right?
Yeah.
And again, what scares me and does keep me up at night is people just don't seem to understand that is the exact formula for fascism.
Yeah.
That by the time it does get to the point where it's really so over the top, it's not even believed.
I mean, the country was almost a powder keg over the separating families at the border.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're just going to do it again. And it got buried with the foreign news.
Yeah. Well, again, with all this Kavanaugh stuff, and I sent something around on Facebook, with all this stuff, weapons of mass distraction.
Yeah.
How many people really know that through all of that, Congress passed something like the $3.8 billion tax cut for the wealthiest people? Another tax cut?
Another one?
All behind the smoke of the Kavanaugh fiasco.
Sneaky bastards.
That's what they do.
Wow.
That's what they do. So, this idea of learning hasn't really seemed to come up. So we have to keep pecking away at it. We have to keep attacking the rhetoric. And maybe one day we can get to that place where people are sort of understanding it. They are woke, not just as a word or as a concept, but they truly are woke, and they get it. And we don't have to have these double standards anymore. Because, again, I'm afraid that we're going to be digging in even deeper with these scripts that we're using to raise kids. These sexual scripts, the abuse and harassment. Right? People talk about the rate of abuse that women generally experience. But how often have we heard that over 70%, I think it's like 74% of girls have been either catcalled or harassed on the street before the age of 11.
Oh, my God.
11-year-olds are being sort of subject to this stuff too.
Yeah.
Right? And do we really call boys on their stuff? When they're doing the catcalling, how old is this idea? It goes back to these stereotypes in the 30s and 40s of the boy dipping the girl's pigtails in the ink,
Right.
and all that kind of stuff. Or in the pool, the boy will go over to the girl and like dunk her underwater and hold it down and then run away, kind of thing. And the explanation, even from the girl's parents, is, oh, you know, it's just the way he shows he likes you.
Right.
He's just teasing. It's okay. And no, I'm sorry, it's not okay. It really isn't. And the more that becomes okay, the more girls are just in it deeper and deeper.
So again, like it comes up very often between us, the same frustration that drove us all those years in sex ed until it drove us out of sex ed, right? And, for one turn or another. I mean, it goes back, to give you an idea how far it goes back. I was actually looking through some files trying to find those old transparencies that we used to use on sexuality education versus sexual conditioning. And that same idea that while everybody was carrying on and fighting, going crazy over sexuality education, sexual conditioning was happening with everything their kids were being bombarded with.
Absolutely.
With everything they saw on television.
Absolutely.
And in the movies and on the internet and from everywhere. And it doesn't seem to have changed an iota that kids are growing up in this just complete bombardment. It's probably worse now of nothing but mixed messages about sex, about their bodies, about these still stereotyped gender scripts about what boys are supposed to do, how girls are supposed to be.
Well, let's go back to the Kavanaugh hearing and how many people, right? Not just the senators and people in Congress and the people that we've been here, but people in general, male and female, right? And it kind of pisses me off when I hear this from women. Yeah. But how many people through all of this was justifying his alleged behavior, right? And again, it all came down to, and we've said this so many times already, but boys will be boys. And how many, and again, these women that were shown in all these different, talking circles about how, what can we expect? That's what boys do. That's what they're like.
Yeah.
And again, we were boys.
I saw
that.
women in one of these focus groups saying they couldn't believe. One woman said the only reason she was going out to vote, she said she wasn't a voter, but she was motivated to vote because of what they put that poor man through.
That poor man, yes.
What they put him through. Wow.
Yeah.
From a woman.
Yep.
That's
now, again, that shows you how deep it runs.
Yeah.
Right? That it does run so deep that women have been, I think, both voluntarily and involuntarily supporting it.
We talked a couple months ago about those women that would say, if you asked them, what are your values about sexuality? They say, wait, let me check with my husband.
Right.
Or my pastor. They don't have any.
My values are whatever he tells me they are.
Or whatever my parents said they were supposed to be.
Exactly. But, and again, a lot of this stuff, we're looking at this, as it's coming to a head. But where does it start? Right? Let's look at the subtleties. Right? That definitely start with how we address, how we respond to boys being boys.
Yeah.
We give them a pass. And we tell girls from a very young age that they're just supposed to deal with it and go along with it.
Yeah.
And you know what? You don't need to make a fuss. It's not that big of a deal. Come on, he was kidding. He was being cute. He does it because he likes you.
I like what you posted last week. #stop it.
Yeah. I want that to get some traction.
Trending.
Yeah, I hope so. Because again, like I said, I was a little disappointed. I thought the no more, I didn't realize that was already out there.
Right.
But #stop it.
It's that simple.
Yep.
Right? Like we were saying last week. Just we wouldn't have to spend so much energy raising girls how to not be assaulted if we just raised boys not to assault.
Yeah.
Duh.
One would think it would be that easy.
You need scientists for that. Well, it doesn't matter because Trump's firing them all. It's that crazy.
Yeah. Well, because, of course, scientists have a very definite political agenda.
Yeah.
End quote.
Yeah.
Oh my! So what are we looking at here? How do we do this? I mean, does really? I mean, if you have boys making these jokes and making these comments to girls, does that really translate into sexual violence?
No, but I think it certainly contributes to early messaging about. Well, first of all, there's different rules for different genders. That boys are kind of, like you said, given that pass to act in dominating ways. And I think that just is a natural segue to the body stuff, the objectifying stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
The idea that women have something, even young girls have something to protect.
Can I read you something about that? I have something here that just something I was looking at earlier, and I was very surprised that I liked it as much as I did. But this is actually from the Girl Scouts organization, and it's an article on a conversation you must have with your kids today. But on that very, very point, again, when we're giving boys these passes, and we're not calling them on these kinds of comments and stuff like that, this is when girls witness these attitudes and behavior being written off as normal. There are serious and lasting consequences. Without even realizing it, they start focusing more time on how they look than exploring how they think or what they do. The clothing they gravitate toward, even when very young, may emphasize sexuality more than comfort or individual expression. Girls may mistreat their bodies in order to attain the physique deemed most desirable by our culture. And most devastating of all, aggressive and objectifying language creates an environment in which people are less likely to speak up when they experience sexual harassment or violence.
Wow.
Right? Now, for all these people
Go
that
Girl Scouts.
could not,
That's pretty-
accept any reality to the fact that, well, why did she wait so long? They got to understand that there is a reason why girls don't speak up. Right? And if they're not speaking up when they're being actually sexually violently abused, they're certainly not going to speak up when they're being harassed. Right? So we can look at this entire spectrum
Right.
and see that it's silent. And this is how we're raising girls. These are the scripts that girls are growing up with. And boys are growing up with the scripts that it's okay to do that.
Yeah, I still can't help seeing some connection to that commodification.
Sure.
That there's sexuality is this thing that is to be
Traded. It's like currency.
or protected and
Sure.
tried to be taken.
Right. Like you protect, again, it's funny. It's how you said that. I was giving a talk this morning for a senior group in Delray. And, one of the things that came up is often how paternalistic adult children tend to be. Right? And it's sort of like, you're not going to date my parent. And a lot of that is because, again, I want to protect your assets. I want to protect your money. I want to protect, the things that you have from gold diggers and stuff like that.
I don't want you getting married.
What are we protecting, in young girls?
Wow. That's funny.
It really is. And again, when we hear, boys that are the result of that kind of stuff too. When boys are growing up hearing all of this speech and all this stuff that objectifies and normalizes violence against women and girls, then we're raising them to grow up with a warped sense of masculinity. And the one thing that they don't have in that vein is any sense of compassion or empathy or certainly respect. Girls are just looked at as, what can I get from them?
Yeah.
Right? So I think, really the imperative, right? And again, we could talk about how do we raise girls in a way that, makes it easier for them to stand up for themselves, to say, tell somebody, parents need to be able to communicate to their girls that if you came to me with something, I will support you, I will believe you.
Right.
I am not going to shut you down. But that's defensive stuff, right? We've got to reshape boys so that they'll stop it.
Right.
Hashtag stop it.
Right. And yes, I'm thinking that, why now, tonight, and for the past 30 years, does any talk of sex ed and sexual conditioning have to invariably be so unsexy, right? So how do we sexy it up? I think that's pretty easy too, right? Because if boys had a different message that they can expect much more pleasure out of sexual encounters from an enthusiastically willing, sexually empowered woman, instead of, you got to do this, you got to wait for your opportunity to put the moves on, you got to try and grab a boob and like that.
But that's the commodification.
Yeah, but it switches to a pleasure based model, which is inherently egalitarian and mutual, and has both parties, be they same sex, other sex, poly, whatever the arrangements,
Right.
that sexuality is understood as a shared, say commodity. At least it's
But
everybody's
if it's shared,
benefiting from it.
right, and there's that
There-
mutual respect
Right.
that would invariably
Yeah.
come along with that. That's kind of lacking right now.
Yeah, because we're just as pleasure phobic as we are, sex phobic.
Right.
But
Right.
erotophobes. I forgot whose term that is.
Yeah,
Right.
that's kind of an older one. But now, what can parents do then? I mean, are there tangible things that parents can do
Well, sure.
in raising their boys?
Again, same message for 30 years. Not have sex ed for your kids be the talk, which
Right.
is never helpful, never on time, and never comfortable. Have sex ed be a natural, lifelong part of, if you're a parent, you're a sexuality educator, right?
Right.
Which begins with messages, both verbal and nonverbal, that start from diaper changing.
Sure. Sure.
I have some opinions. I don't need to get too vocal about them, but this trend toward genderless child rearing,
yeah.
and parents telling the preschool, teachers, workers, don't call any attention to their genitals while you're changing their diapers because we're okay.
We don't want it to know.
I don't want to. I don't even know what kind of future that's gonna. But a healthy understanding of the the different but equal. There's a familiar theme.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And starting with pleasure in our own bodies, and eliminating generations, eons of hand slapping and genital fear. Right. Being comfortable enough to talk to kids, to raise them with a health message that's the same for sexual health as it is for oral health or
Sure.
foot health or changing your underwear health or anything else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Normalizing sexual health as a part of raising kids.
So, in order for that to happen, parents also need to do something that most don't like to do, and that's kind of like check themselves.
Get some sex ed themselves.
Be honest about
Right.
what they don't know, what's difficult to talk
course.
about, and get resources, get help, find somebody who can do it. But it has to be done. The
Absolutely.
days of it's hard, so I won't do it have to be over.
And first of all, nothing's hard with the internet. Go open Google and get to work. There's no shortage of resources. Parents could do it in one night or one weekend, learn a lifetime of how to raise sexually healthy kids.
Absolutely.
Shoot us an email at the show on the Facebook page for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. We'll send you resources. Half a dozen websites you can go to, get all the information you could possibly
Absolutely.
need.
And get creative. One of the things that I used to do with some of the youth development programs that started, and especially the with the younger kids, when I would talk to them about that. Do you remember when I would have them get their favorite rap tune, and rap in particular, because again, it is sort of on a different level with misogyny, but get their favorite rap song, get the lyrics.
Yeah.
Right? And parents can do this. Sit down and let's look at these lyrics. Look at what this says about women. And then have these kids and then talk to them.
Look at some YouTube
Do you see your
videos.
sister like this? Do you see me like this? Is
Look
grandma
at some
like
YouTube
this?
videos of 6 and 7-year-old girls twerking and
Absolutely.
dancing and
Absolutely.
these,
But just really looking more at the
overtly-
boys,
Yeah.
right? And wanting to focus on that, have them do like this evaluation. What is the message? What does this say about girls? What girls are in your life? Right? Is this a description of these girls that you know? And going through that and then having them rewrite them. That was my favorite part of it. Having them rewrite the lyrics in a way that sounded more in sync with what they really believe and how they really feel with the women they knew. Nice. And again, it wasn't a writing exercise, but the awarenesses that came out of that. Some of these kids absolutely blew me away with just the realization that they had that, you know what, I used to sing all these lyrics, but once I pictured my sister or I pictured my mother, it bothered me. Right? That I consider a success. Yeah. And that's something that parents can do. There's no magic, no special equipment needed for that, no special training. Sit down with your kids' music. Right? In fact, they can do that. They know what some of the stuff their kids are listening to. They can even just pick a song. It doesn't even matter. Look through it. Find the storyline. Right. And then work with your sons about changing that message. It's got to start in the home. Right? It's not going to happen in school. Right? It should, because school is primarily an institution of socialization, but it's not going to happen there.
Well, it's always been the hot potato, right? Of course, every sane thinking person knows that if two people have a child, then they automatically become sexuality educators, but they don't. So it gets hot potatoed over to the school, and then the school tosses it around. Who does it? Phys ed or health, or the nurse comes around once a year, or it just doesn't get done. Or we end up with, 20 years of abstinence only till marriage. Oh, which is not, that still continues to this day.
Not the point that I'm calling ridiculous. The people that do that, I call ridiculous. They come in and lie to kids. Plain and simple, they lie.
Well, it's justified
because they're in the sex prevention field.
Right. They don't have to be uncomfortable. And deal with the reality that the little children they made via a sexual act, let's not forget, are sexual beings and are going to grow up and have the same feelings and urges and impulses and dreams and fantasies and sexual responses that they did. Right. And whether that goes well or poorly is almost entirely up to them.
Well, yeah, but it's generally by default. And it generally goes poorly by default.
Right, because it doesn't get done.
Right. So another thing that I think parents can do
plugs in.
is just make sure you're having these conversations. And one of the things too is to let boys know that when they hear other boys saying these kinds of things, it's not about being polite. They need to call it out.
Yes.
Right? Even if it's, hey, you know what? I have a sister, or I know girls, and that's not what they're like. Not all of them are like that, so you can't really say that. If they learn how to call that stuff out, it'll be a whole lot better. So,
well, that'll do it for us this week.
Yes, indeed. There's the music.
You can shoot us an email again on the Facebook page for Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers, and join us here next Monday and every Monday at 9 o'clock. Thank you.
Indeed. Thank you, and have a great week.
You've been listening to Sex Talk with the Siegel Brothers. Join us every Monday night at 9 p.m. on WNN, 1470 AM and 95.3 FM. Or watch live streaming video at AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, or look for the shows on YouTube. Thanks for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again next week. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its